Hey, indie filmmakers, I'm Nick Bodmer.
I'm Griffin Hammond, and on this week's episode, we look at the actual tech specs that theaters require for your digital cinema files.
Plus, your questions about SD cards and X-ray machines, the differences between European and American camera models, and how to film a weeks-long time-lapse. Hello, Griffin.
Hello, Nick. How are you?
How are you?
I am good. And
fantastic.
We got an interesting email that I want to start off this week's episode with.
Let's do it. Let's jump right into it.
It's from our friend John Cochrane, who lives in Brisbane, Australia. And
for reference, is that Griffo and Nico?
Yes. Yeah.
Excellent. One of my favorite people.
He loves to share Aussie slang with us, and he's also the CEO of an advertising agency. Of his advertising agency.
CEO. That sounds cool.
In fact, I'll just go ahead and plug his website, johncockraneadvertising.com.
It's a long URL, but maybe we'll put it in the show notes so you can just click it.
Yeah, you can also find that at Hey.film. And here's his email. This his latest email to us. It goes, "G'day again, guys. We create a number of commercials for cinema, so I decided to send you a copy of the current specs required for most Australian cinema screens." So he's actually sent us a PDF document.
Yeah, this is very interesting. This is not something I have seen before.
And so we should share all these numbers and stats and values with you at Hey.film, but I thought we could go through these and figure out if what we're doing is good enough for Australian cinema.
Let's find out. Let's dig deep.
Well, so this document is called Production Specifications and Requirements for 2D Digital Cinema Commercial Mastering. So I guess these are the commercials that are playing before movies, right?
That's what it seems like, yep.
And they need to be high definition, 1920 by 1080. Or they can be widescreen 2K, which is 1998 by 1080. So
that's not one I'm familiar with, so that's interesting.
Yeah. That's
a little wider.
1.85 aspect ratio, yeah.
Okay.
And they also have to be 24 or 25 frames per second. I guess I actually don't even know.
They can do both, which makes sense.
Well, I guess, yeah, Australia is probably like the UK and most of the world where it's PAL. So television is 25 frames per second, and cinema is 24 everywhere.
Right.
But notice if you shot your commercial in 4K at 60 frames per second, like I do sometimes.
Not an option. Not an option.
This is what I've continually run into. I think we even talked about this last week. When I try to screen my film in theaters, it always has to be 1080 at 30 frames per second or 24. I guess I could go a little bit bigger now. I could go to 1998 by 1080.
Just a little wider. Just a skosh.
And it looks like they want everything in
field
ProRes.
dominance progressive. What does that mean? That means not interlaced. Is that really what they're talking about? Is that an issue these days?
Yeah, that's exactly what they mean. Yeah, I mean, if it was interlaced, then the field dominance would either be upper or lower. But they're just saying, screw that. We need progressive frames. Normal frames.
Sense.
Yeah.
And like you said, they want it in Apple ProRes 444 or 422 HQ.
Yeah.
Which of those is what you use?
I would be exporting in 422. A lot of times I don't even export in 422 HQ. I just do like there's pretty much like a low quality 422, regular, and then there's HQ. And I just do the regular one.
And the 444 versus the 422 is bitrate, or not bitrate, but color depth and things like that?
Yeah, it's color depth. It's the number of pixels that you're actually recording the color for. And I think 444 means all of the pixels are being recorded. Yeah.
Interesting. As opposed
and 422
to
means like
it
every other
doing
pixel. You're actually writing down what the color is.
Gotcha. So for the ones that don't have color, it just averages what the pixels around it, and that's how it figures it out?
Yeah, and that's what, I think scientists have long figured out, that humans can't see enough color in a picture to notice the difference, or, we don't really catch that much detail. So as long as you get half the colors right and you just round the other ones appropriately around that, it looks normal to us. So they also
that was
say
their
that
preferred formats, but they have some acceptable formats as well.
Yeah, it looks like they'll accept 10-bit uncompressed QuickTime, but I guess what they're saying is they don't need that. They'd rather have ProRes. And it doesn't have to be 10-bit necessarily. And then it also mentions standard definition material accepted on approval only. But it also says 4:3 aspect ratios will not be accepted.
If you're paying us enough money, we may consider it.
Yeah.
But not widescreen.
Exactly.
Now, here's something I thought is interesting. Please ensure all graphics are within safe title. Why is that an issue in a modern projection system?
Good question.
I thought so. That's why I asked it. I was hoping you would have a good answer.
I don't know.
It does say graphics outside this area may be clipped in cinema, so...
Yeah, I mean, I suppose they must be cropping a little bit, or they have the ability to pull the curtains in a little bit. I don't know. But also just... They probably also know, like, you just should have graphics not at the edge of the frame. Some people may not be able to read them if they're short. So John says they also require the audio files separately. So you're sending the video and audio files separately. And this says that preferred for audio specifications is a 5.1 mix. Which I think
Griffin.
we've talked about, how I never do a 5.1 mix.
We have talked about that. Indeed.
But I think they also point out here that they can do the mix for you if you supply stereo files.
Oh, okay. That's nice.
Maybe I read that wrong. Because I know I'm not going to give them a 5.1 mix. I'm too lazy. And then do you see how they're receiving the files?
It looks like FTP. Classic FTP. File Transfer Protocol. That's a little old school, but hey, it works. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah. Well, and it always feels like whenever I work with like a media company or like advertising or PR, it's always FTP. Like people in the media world are often using that.
It's just reliable, Although it does say here that you can send a Dropbox link or something like that.
Oh, okay.
Which would be how I would do it.
Yeah.
Or you can drop off a hard drive.
Well, and just knowing like our workflow now, it's funny how often I've relied on FTP in the past and how often I've hated it, because I'll be in like a hotel or something trying to send something like critical for television and the internet cuts out. And I think most FTP clients can't like start a
resume
upload.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even like using Google Drive was smarter. If I used Google Drive, it seemed like it was smart enough to resume an upload. And now you and I, we use Resilio Sync to send our files to each other, because I can't imagine trying to like share the podcast files with each other through FTP.
Oh, it would be a nightmare. It would be a nightmare. Yeah, this works better. I agree.
Yeah. So to recap, your digital cinema advertising video you're making, it will, however you're creating it, when you master it for this cinema network, you're gonna have to send it in 1080, 24 frames per second, QuickTime, 422 HQ probably, with a 5.1 surround sound mix.
Separate wave file audio 5.1 mix.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, that was very cool. I had not seen that kind of professional level requirements before, so it was fun. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, yeah. And it's just a good reminder how often, I mean, we think of theaters as like these places where they're showing the highest quality content, but a lot of times the projector maxes out at 1080.
Well, should we answer some filmmaking questions, Mr. Hammond?
Yeah.
We have a YouTube comment from Bridget Miles, and this was echoed by more than one person. Griffin, if there's anything we can do to help your mom, a site we can donate to, anything at all, please let us know. So glad everyone is safe.
Thank you very much, Bridget. Yeah, last week we talked about the fire in my mom's apartment, and luckily, like I said last week, the recovery was going pretty well, and today I can report that things are still probably things have gone even better than I thought they would. I mean, things are moving along quickly. My mom is already moving into a new apartment, and the insurance company is being really cool, and so far so good. So yeah, I appreciate
you guys are okay right now. Nothing you desperately need. All right.
Yeah,
well, that's good.
Nothing we need right now. Everything's under control, and so I appreciate everyone offering their help. And I'm sure one day if something bad enough happens that I need your help, I will definitely come to you. But at the moment, we're doing okay.
Just don't come to me, Griffin, because I'm probably busy.
I'd probably go to you first, and then I would go to the podcast audience.
Well, after I've turned you down, then you can ask the podcast audience. Right.
Here's an email we got from Paul, who says he's a first-time documentary filmmaker, and he has a series of questions. So maybe we can kind of lightning around these. One, he's wondering, he has a Sony Pxw X70 camcorder. I'm not familiar with this particular camera, but it's an HD camera. It's one of these weird cameras where it shoots HD out of the box, but it's I don't know how the camera companies could do this, but they do this. The camera is capable of shooting 4K. The trick is you have to pay them $500 to unlock that.
Okay. So the hardware's capable, and you buy like a license?
Yeah. I mean, in a way, I understand why they do this, because it's like the camera companies can make this technology. Maybe it's even cheaper to just go ahead and put technology in all the cameras. But just in terms of marketing and price points, you have to be able to offer a cheaper option, and you have to take some features away. I don't know. It's weird, but I understand kind of why they do it.
Yeah.
So I guess that's in the back of his head. He could upgrade this thing, but he's also wondering, is it better to get like a Panasonic GH5 or a Sony A7S or something? And his second question about this camera is that it maxes out at 50 megabits per second. So is that okay? So let's start with that.
Yes.
Yeah. I think it's okay. I mean, the GH5 can do 150 megabits per second. I often am shooting in the 100 megabit per second mode. But like if I think back to the GH3 when I shot Sriracha, that was a documentary. I'm very happy with how it turned out, and we showed it in a lot of theaters. And maybe that was shot at 28 megabits per second?
I was going to say, I think it was under 50.
I mean, I think maybe the GH3 could max out to like 72, and it was I can't remember if it had to be hacked or not, or I can't remember. Maybe I was shooting more like 72. But still, I think 50 megabits in an H.264 codec, like an AVC codec, is potentially fine.
Yeah.
I mean, some people will say, oh no, you need to have 200 megabits per second if you're a real filmmaker. But I don't know. I don't think that matters too much. I think getting properly lit shots and good audio is much more important than the bit rate.
Totally agree.
And then he goes on to ask, in general, do cable and television networks expect 4K content? This kind of goes to what we were just talking about. I can upgrade to 4K with this camera if necessary, but I'd prefer to shoot in 1080 because of the huge file storage issues with 4K. He uses Final Cut Pro for editing and don't know how to edit 4K with multiple 2 terabyte external storage drives. But editing is a whole other issue. I would need to purchase an array storage device, I guess. So yeah, first of all, does he even need 4K?
Well, we've talked about this before. I mean, I think if you're going to be putting a lot of work into a project and it's something you want to stand the test of time, I think 4K is nice to have. Though if it is, going to cost a significant amount of money to enable 4K, and then you're going to have to deal with upgrading your editing rig to handle the file size, then maybe it's not worth that level of investment. Maybe those are dollars and time you can spend better elsewhere. if you're shooting this kind of lean, which it sounds like he is.
Yeah, I will say, don't shoot 4K unless you're prepared for the file size, because that can be an issue, and just processing speed. It takes longer to edit. But that being said, if I were going to shoot another documentary like Sriracha today, I would do it in 4K because I have the technology and I like the way it looks. So I would do it. But yeah, I would need to buy more hard drives and keep up with it. But I also don't think that television networks need 4K. So like when I was shooting news for Bloomberg Television, everything we put on TV was 1080. So I would shoot some things in 4K when I felt like I needed the extra clarity, or if I needed some options to punch in. But a lot of things I would just shoot in 1080 because I knew that's exactly what it was going to be when I put it on TV.
Yep.
I mean, Nick, how are you shooting your camera right now?
1080.
I'm shooting 1080 right now for the podcast because we know
easy peasy.
We don't need 4K for this particular project.
That's right. I don't look good in 4K. We don't need that much detail. All right, we've got an email from Warren who says, I'll be traveling to the Midwest in a few weeks for my daughter's graduation. Congratulations. I plan to leave home with several empty SD cards and return with lots of footage on them. Do I need to be concerned about the airport scanning equipment? I assume he's talking about X-ray and millimeter wave detection security devices.
Yeah, the TSA, you're going to go through X-rays.
This used to be a problem with real film, right? If you used high ISO film, the X-ray could actually overexpose your film and ruin your shots.
Yeah, so they used to say, don't send your film through the X-ray machine. Do take it with you through the metal detector.
Right.
And so you do see this question a lot about SD cards, and I think the answer is no, it doesn't matter if they go through X-ray machines.
I would agree. Yes, the media should be unaffected by X-ray and millimeter wave detection. Don't think you need to worry about it. Otherwise, every laptop and phone that went through X-ray would get scrambled. So
I guess
nothing to worry about.
For someone who travels a lot, I don't know. Does only your body go through the millimeter wave when you go through the backscatter machine, or does your stuff also go through millimeter wave?
No, the whole point of millimeter wave is to be able to see through clothing, I think, basically, so they can see if you're hiding anything.
Yeah.
I think your bags are going through a more traditional X-ray, which looks deeper into things, which is what they need for bags.
So chances are your SD cards are never even going to see these millimeter waves because, well, if you had them in your back pocket, TSA is going to be like, what's that in your back pocket?
Exactly.
And just my own experience, I definitely travel with about 8 SD cards on all my trips and have probably taken those SD cards in my camera bag through X-ray machines probably 200 times, and they're fine. I think the bigger question is, if you're traveling with camera equipment and you do it a lot, you may want to get TSA pre-check or global entry, because I find that they hassle me a lot less. My bags rarely get pulled aside in TSA pre, but if I'm not in that pre-line, they almost always get pulled out after they go through the X-ray. It's like, whoa, what are all these wires? But I think they trust me because they've done a background check on me.
Right. I love TSA pre-check just for the speed of getting through the airport.
So here's a Twitter question from Filippo Tasso about, why do I feel like that was Tosco? Maybe, I can't remember if it's spelled right here. And this is about your camera, Nick, the G85. Filippo's wondering, what's the difference between the G85 and the G80? Did you even know about this other model?
I don't know. Hopefully you looked into this, because I did not read ahead in the questions.
Yeah, so
I'm gonna, can I guess? Oh, I hit my microphone. Let me guess. I'm going to guess they are exactly the same, except for one is European and has, as he describes it, the idiotic recording time limitation, and one does not.
Right. Yeah, the G80 is the same camera, but it's the European model. There's also a G81, which is the German model of this particular Panasonic camera. Not sure why they do that. I'm also not sure why I don't know, all these like numbered models. I guess in a way I like the GH name because it sounds like my name, but the GH5 doesn't
together.
Really,
that's funny.
You've never thought of that? But it's like the GH5 doesn't tell you anything about the camera, and like the G85, like I can't infer anything about this camera based on that model naming system. And you would assume those are two different cameras.
Yeah.
So your G85 doesn't have a recording limit?
Correct.
Clearly, because we're recording long podcasts.
We are.
So yeah, the G80 does stop at 29:59, I think, and you have to restart the recording.
My understanding of that is anything that records more than 30 minutes, like there's an extra tax on it because it's technically a camcorder, and they just don't want to pay the tax. Is that right?
Yeah, that's true. And a lot of camera makers have that limit. But you'll notice that also a lot of American camera makers will still have that limit. I mean, various camera models, regardless where they're, what market they're...
Just because they don't want to deal with multiple models just for US and European.
Yeah. And some
but
cameras have trouble...
That would be a game changer for me. I need the long recording time.
Yeah. I mean, some cameras even have trouble recording that long without overheating, so there's also that problem too. But yeah, I think it's mostly a geographic tax issue. But other than that, I think there may be a difference with your camera. I bet your camera only shoots the NTSC modes.
Probably.
And it's possible the European one only shoots... Actually, I almost feel like the European one can do both, and maybe yours is the one that's limited and can only do NTSC.
Boo.
So, different frame rates on these cameras too, maybe.
All right, we got a Twitter question from Alp0. Not sure if you've talked about ND filter brands, but my images always seem very soft with ND filters. I've tried 5 different brands, but they're all cheap. Is it the brand causing that? Are the pricier ones really worth it? What do you use?
I use this brand called B&W or B+W, which I really like. I think it's a German brand. But I have used cheaper ones. Like I've used a Polaroid Variable Nd.
Yep.
Which I learned at, I think the last time I was at NAB, I realized Polaroid isn't around anymore.
Somebody just bought their brand.
Yeah, so they just licensed the name. So the people that make a Polaroid brand, I don't know who makes it, but I have no idea. But I don't know. A lot of people really like Tiffin brand. Those are like the more expensive ones. But I think B+W looks really good. And I would be wary of I think I used to have some ND filters made that I bought at Best Buy, and maybe they were like $10 each. I can't even remember the name. I feel like the brand was something like Shark or Fish or something. Like it was not a brand you've heard of.
I also have the B+W.
Yeah. And you like those too?
Based on your recommendation. And it has worked well for me, yep.
But as we've talked about before, I also think that static NDs, not the variable NDs, I mean, I just feel like if you're putting less glass in front of your lens, then you want to put the least amount of glass in front of your lens as possible. So
yep.
I can't imagine that a cheap variable ND is always going to look very good.
Right.
Our last question today is an email from Brendan, who is doing a time-lapse of a really long, weeks-long event. They're doing some renovation at his office, and his coworkers have asked him to do a time-lapse, but he's wondering how to deal with that kind of length. Like, if they're only working 9 to 5 every day, how would you go about this?
Well, I would want an AC adapter for the camera, right?
Yes.
So you don't have to deal with batteries. And I think I'd want a very large SD card, so I wouldn't have to worry about changing out SD cards more than once a day. And then I would leverage photo mode with an intervalometer. So I wouldn't shoot video and let it run continuously. I just have it take photos periodically. You just want to make sure that you adjust your shutter speed correctly so that you get the right amount of motion blur that you're going to want when you play it back. So Griffin, you're the king of doing the math for this kind of stuff.
Right.
What do you recommend?
Well, I agree definitely with the power. I didn't even think about that. I'm thinking about how I would do this, and I do have an AC adapter that I could plug into like my GH5. But as far as the shutter speed and getting motion blur right, I don't know if that's even possible. Like,
right.
You're probably going to shoot more photos than you'll ultimately need because you don't really know exactly what's going to happen. It may turn out that, oh, they only were doing the cool work in the first 2 hours of every day, and then it got really boring. Or only the first week of this looks pretty cool, and the second and third week don't look cool. So you may end up throwing out a lot of photos. But my assumption is that you're going to shoot hundreds of photos every day, and depending on the speed you play it back, you might skip a lot of them. So I think you're kind of screwed on the shutter speed anyway.
Okay.
So
would you shoot in auto mode, or are you going to lock it down to manual? I assume the lighting is going to change fairly dramatically from 9 to 5.
Yeah, I guess it depends on is this completely indoors? Is there sunlight coming in? If there is a lot of sun coming in, maybe you would put it in some sort of auto exposure mode. But otherwise, I do like the idea of, if the lighting's going to be pretty consistent, I like the idea of trying to maintain the same exposure levels and just pick a relatively long shutter, but it can't be crazy. You know, I might only do like a second long shutter, so there'll be some blur, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, you might want to play around with, doing some shots before it starts so you get an idea of what it's going to look like and you can tweak.
Yeah. And think about, as much as you can limit this to, like, think about, are they really working 9 to 5 every day? Or, you might even strategically think about what exactly are they renovating? Are they going to, first they're doing first they're tearing down a bunch of stuff all over the room. Then, yeah, start with a really wide shot and get all of that for 2 days while they do it. And then if for a week they're just like painting one corner or something, I don't know, maybe you skip that week or you go in for a close-up. You can always like come back to the wide shot at the end. You might do a series of time lapses. So you just want to think about where the action is going to happen, how long is that action actually happening, and if they're
I think you're right. I do like when I watch these, long-term time lapses when the angle changes and we get a slightly different view of different action throughout them. So don't feel like you have to be in the exact same spot for the entire time. I think Griffin's right. Maybe each day or every few days it makes sense to move and see a different part of it.
Especially that's what worries me about that amount of length, is just knowing that it's going to change into something you couldn't have imagined.Maybe you can fully envision this. Maybe it's very clear what they're going to do. But sometimes, especially with a renovation, you're like, oh, they actually made the room bigger than I originally thought it was going to be. So now I can't even see everything. So, don't be afraid to change it. Because sometimes I find myself doing even just like a time-lapse overnight. And I realize halfway through, oh, the cool thing is actually going to be happening over here now, and I really should have been framing it over there. And so sometimes I just have to make the decision to give up on a time lapse I've been shooting and start again. So I think you just have to be willing to make that tough decision.
Yep. We did it again, Mr. Hammond.
Yeah. We solved the world's problems.
One tweet at a time.
Well, I'm glad you're here with me doing it.
Fantastic. Well, we'll talk to you again next week, yes?
Yeah. Next Wednesday, same usual time.
Same time, same place. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Let's just do one more. Let's improv this one. We'll just make up questions.
Griffin, we got a Twitter question here from Smelly Bob. He wants to know why you're such a jerk.
Smelly Bob.
And sadly, I had stopped recording before I came up with that hilarious joke.
That's okay. I'm recording your audio.
Damn.